Phil Spencer should be fired!
How come reviews accounted for Redfall's performance modes and not Jedi Survivor?
Xbox are idiots for not delaying Redfall.
Jesus Christ!
If you haven't heard, Xbox's next big AAA first-party exclusive has released, and it is not reviewing too well. It is the game Redfall, which I'm sure you've heard about if you're watching this, but you haven't. Just next game from Arcane Studios, a very well-acclaimed studio. The people behind the cult classic of the remake of Prey, or reboot, whatever you want to call it, Deathloop, bunches of 10 out of 10s from 2021, and Dishonored 2, which is maybe one of the best stealth games of all time. Like, Arcane is now known as one of those most well-reviewed studios out there. So in Redfall, their next game under the Xbox banner, you know, after being acquired by Microsoft, is not reviewing well. It has a lot of narratives being thrown around right now. Like Phil Spencer should be fired, or how come the performance mode is so bad when it's next-gen exclusive, and it should have gotten delayed, and there's a lot of things. First, let's address those main three comments, and I'll insert my personal take at the end of the video, because you might not care about that. If you do, great, stick around to the end. But Phil Spencer being fired. Phil Spencer is the head of the Xbox division, you know, the gaming division of Microsoft, basically. And this is the man that got Nadella, I can't ever announce his name, the guy in charge of Microsoft. You know, he finally got Microsoft to go all in on gaming. During the Xbox One era, they really took a big step back and tried to make it, let's do TVs, let's do internet, let's do all this stuff, and, you know, we'll have games, but let's try to appeal to the masses. They scrapped that, hired Phil Spencer, and then they addressed their weaknesses of not having studios by hiring a bunch. They started to actually make some decent, well-acclaimed games. They made some partnerships, and especially they brought in Game Pass, and they started to invest more and more into this gaming division. And that is something Phil Spencer did. Seeing folks say, get rid of this person because they made a mistake, or they let this mistake happen, shows me how strongly cancel culture is a thing. And this is the point of the video that I get 100 dislikes. Cancel culture to me is really overtaking the internet super hard. Now, cancel culture also gets things done. Criticism also gets things done. And the thing about cancel culture is that if somebody makes a single mistake, then you are done. But wait a minute. There's been so many mistakes the past few years. What are you talking about? That's fair. That's very fair. But I find it such a weird narrative that if somebody makes a single mistake, and Phil Spencer having to manage so many different things, and he has people like Matt Booty overseeing Xbox Game Studios, and Bethesda kind of just doing their own thing, giving them the backing to do their own thing. They might have even released Starfield and Redfall last year based off their track record. Bethesda has a track record of releasing buggy-ass games. And who knows, maybe they just would have released them both last year if it wasn't for that Microsoft backing. That is pure speculation. Total speculation. But I don't think that one wrong versus four rights defines someone's fate. Point number 2. How come the reviews accounted for Redfall being a big weird technical thing and not Jedi Survivors? Like, that's bullshit. You consider Jedi Survivors this great 9 out of 10 game, but Redfall has the same performance problems and you label that as a 4 out of 10? Horseshit. That's fanboyism. Like, you're just doing that because it's Xbox and we want to label whatever. Jedi Survivors is a good game. Redfall is the first Arcane game to finally get some bad reviews, and it's not just because of the performance. I even watched 2 reviews last night, and they brought up the performance, but they had so many other things to bring up that weren't the performance. They brought up how the AI are very dumb. They don't really think much for themselves and make smart decisions to make it a challenging game. In fact, there's a lot of things that are broken about the combat system and you becoming overpowered. They also mentioned that this is Arcane's first open world game, and because of that, a lot of the environments just kind of, while yes, seems true to Massachusetts culture, there's a lot of just bland openness that you were just having to run across the map to get somewhere, and that gets very boring fast. There is a lot of bad that they figured out on top of the technical stuff, and therefore the technical stuff is just one part of the mini bad. Whereas Jedi Survivors is a game that has great performances, great story, great art direction, great combat. It has all these great things, but it kind of runs a bit bad. It is next-gen exclusive. People are pointing that out. Good job. And people are pointing out the Redfall problems. Good job. But there's a lot more wrong with Redfall than just the technical performance side of things. So just clearing that out of the way, because I see some people bringing that up, and I'm just like, okay.
But the real question.
Would Redfall have benefited from a delay? Well, I mean, yeah.
The thing about delays is that is usually time you give developers to truly polish something. It is good. It is ready to go, but there's just a lot of bugs that they still need to kink out. And that is what a delay really helps with. A delay doesn't help with core game design. I've been bringing up a lot lately that I read this book, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. And if you really want to try to understand the development of a game and what happens during it and what causes problems, please read that book, because there is so much I learned from it. And one of the big things that I learned is a delay definitely helps. It definitely helps to make sure all the bugs are fine. But what it doesn't help with is core game design and core direction changes or core vision, just not alignment. That is something that has to be settled as early as possible. Because when you make a game, you have this phase one, if you will, that everything is going to be built around. Everything is going to be built around these things, these core pillars, if you will. And once those are settled, then you start to actually design. You start to do all the performance and programming and all this stuff. And those things, that's what the polish is going to go on top of. But if those things aren't ironed out before the polish happens, then there's really not too much you can do other than scrapping, and kind of doing a reset. And that is not something that can be solved in the course of 3 months to a year. That is something that 2 extra years are going to take to fix. So absolutely, a delay might have helped with the technical problems, but that might have just boosted it up by a point. If it's averaging around 5 out of 10 right now, maybe it would have potentially gone up to a 7, but it doesn't seem like that. Because at the core, a game... Okay, here's where we get to the personal take. There was so much talk about before Redfall came out, 30 frames per second is just not enough for next gen. If you have a 30 frames per second game, then you are just not justifying that $70 price tag. And I agree. I truly do agree. There's not going to be a but here. I do agree. If you're going to have that $70 price tag, if you are next gen only, and especially if you're a first person shooter, there has to be a 60 frames per second mode. There just has to be. Now that mode, obviously, maybe it's degraded hardcore. It's 1080p or it's 1440p. If you have to do that, absolutely. There's got to be a 4K option. That's 30. And there's got to be a 60 frame option. Obviously, the best is if it's 4K 60. That's the golden point. And one of the reasons people kind of overlook how Halo Infinite was kind of a technical feat, but we'll talk about that at another time because that game does dynamic 4K 120. But what I disagree with is that defining if a game is good or bad. And this is the case where Redfall Reviews, a lot of people said, they're not going to play it, or maybe that would affect its score. They played it. And there's a lot more that they have problems with than just the performance. And I think you should try it out for yourself. If you wanted to play this game, you should try it out for yourself and not be swayed by the reviews. Me personally, I was on the fence about it. I'm oh, cool, it's on Game Pass. I will try it. But the bigger question, how much pressure does this put on Starfield? How good does Xbox need to make their quality games? There's all these narratives going around that Xbox has to do this, Starfield has to do that. And to make sure we don't ramble for an hour long, to go with the earlier message, because Phil Spencer may have overlooked, one thing, as he's probably overlooked many things. He's also done a lot of good things. That's how it feels right now about Xbox quality games. There's a video I have about that too, and just how does Game Pass really affect the quality of games? Well, in 2021, the last time I did a video about this was Forza Horizon 5, and that game was getting 10 out of 10 reviews left and right. And that was also the year that Xbox won Publisher of the Year on Metacritic. They posted 6 first-party games, and they each were over 80 on Metacritic. They were all very well reviewed, And that was a hot ass year for them. And last year was a really slow year for them, but their partner studios and smaller teams managed to carry it a little bit, with Pentiment also reviewing very well, and As Dusk Falls also reviewing very well, and even showing up a little bit at the Game Awards. The quality narrative is just still a thing that I personally don't understand why we are still talking about this. But on the big blockbuster AAA level, that is 100% understandable. If people are looking for that big AAA blockbuster game, Redfall is not going to be that. And currently there isn't anything like that for Xbox. There hasn't been in quite some time. But has there been very well-reviewed games? Yeah. Like, it's very rare that they don't score less than 70. A lot of the times they're over 80. But Redfall is finally that bleeding edge. And I love seeing somebody bring this up on Twitter. And I'm like, that's actually a good point, because bleeding edge, like Redfall, was a big sidestep for Ninja Theory, another Xbox studio. Bleeding Edge was like a multiplayer, let's try to make an Overwatch style game, and it just did not review well. I played that one, and it just, I don't know, like, it was fine for a day, but I didn't see myself coming back to it. But it was such a sidestep for Ninja Theory, and you have to wonder, did Ninja Theory want to do that, or did Xbox want to do that? And you have to wonder with Redfall, was there a vision like Prey, like Dishonored, like Deathloop, that it was just a single player, much more linear experience, that they wanted you to play as a vampire hunter hunting, helping this town, but maybe like in 2021 when Microsoft acquired Arcane, maybe they asked, hey, is there any way that this could be a co-op shooter? Because we haven't had Gears in a while, and it'd be great to have something else that's co-op. Is there enough time for you to do that? Cool, thanks, bye. And if that happened, that definitely is a part of those pillars I said before, that maybe they didn't plan on it and they kind of had to restructure everything to make that work. Did that happen? No idea. That's what we do here. We like to speculate. But can we say that happened? Or can we say Xbox is at fault? Or can we say this or that because we know that's what happened? No, we're just the internet that wants to put blame on things. And that's why the internet is a crazy ass place. Forza Horizon 5 was that last time that we talked about this topic about quality games and how Game Pass affects the quality of games. Does it? Who knows? I personally don't think so. And there's points about both those on screen. So check those out. And if you want more Xbox speculation, make sure you subscribe.